Hi, welcome to another essay writing video. In today's video, we are looking at an essay that was submitted to me by one of my online students, and we're going to correct it from the beginning to the end and try to make it the strongest essay that we can. If you find this video helpful, I encourage you to visit my websites at www.englishryan.com and englishryan.blogspot.com. I'm sorry I haven't made a video in quite a while now. I think it's been about 5 months, but I've just been very busy here in Shanghai with classes and a few other things. Okay, so the question that I submitted to my student online was this: in many countries, the proportion of older people is steadily increasing. Does this trend have more positive or negative effects on society? I'll give you a second to read that. Okay, so now if we look at the question, the background statement says, in many countries, the proportion of older people is steadily increasing. And I think that's pretty easy to understand. The word steadily just means consistent or constant, and it's not fluctuating and not changing. It's just gradually growing. Now the second part of the question is, does this trend have more positive or negative effects on society? Now this part of the question is a little bit of a trick, because the word that we need to understand here is trend. And if trend is a new word for you, trend means something that is growing or changing at a steady pace. So does this trend have more positive or negative effects on society? So the question is not really asking, do older people have positive or negative effects on society? It's asking, does the growth in numbers of older people have more positive or negative effects on society? So I think that maybe a mistake that a lot of students would make when they see this question is they would read it and quickly think, okay, it's just asking me, do I think old people are a good thing in society or a bad thing? And that's not completely what it's asking. It's asking what the of older people in society. Is this negative or is this positive? Okay, so now we look at the question, and I think it's pretty clear that we would write an argument essay about this. So we would take a stance and form a thesis about this, and write an argument essay. And that's what the students did that I submitted this question to. So now the original essay as it was given to me by the students. And I think what we'll do is we'll take it paragraph by paragraph and just fix things up as we go along. Okay, so first things first, let's look at the introduction paragraph. Okay, now I'll read it aloud. Today, older people make up an increasing proportion of... This is very clear in the government statistics that the inhabitants aged 50 and over has grown in the last 3 decades. It is believed that aged people has a negative effects on society. This will be proven by analyzing one of the way that retired people spend their money, as they are more likely to be providing unpaid care. Okay, now I think what we'll do first is we'll just correct the structure and grammar in the paragraphs, and then afterwards we'll come back and we'll look at how the sentences work together and the ideas. So if we take this first paragraph, now I went ahead and marked this paragraph. So you can see in red some of the grammar and structural areas that need to be improved. So first, up an increasing proportion of our population. That's fine. That's a very nice general background sentence. this is very clear in the government statistics. I don't think we'd say it like that. We could say this, or government statistics have shown, or this is very clear from government statistics, that, now why there's commas around this word, it's kind of strange, but the inhabitants aged 50 and over has grown in the last 3 decades. So we have the word inhabitants, which is plural. So has would become have grown in the last 3 decades. It is believed that aged people has, again should be have, a negative effect on society. So this is a negative, which is 1. So this is effect with no s on society. This will be proven by analyzing one of the way, and it should be ways, one of the ways that retired people spend their money, as they are more likely to not be provided paid care. Okay, so that's just the small grammar issues in the first paragraph. Okay, so now we'll look at the second paragraph, and here is the original paragraph as written by the students, and we'll read it together. On these days, we can see that there are a lots gambling shops that are usually busy of aged people. As older people are retired, the pension money that they normally get are spent in betting shops. This example makes clear where retired people are more interested. Thus, there is an obvious link between aged people and a unhappy society. So I'll give you a second, just look at that paragraph. Maybe you can see some mistakes by yourself. Okay, now let's look ahead here. Here's my corrected version. So firstly, on these days, you wouldn't say on these days, it's just these days. These days, we can see that there are a lots. So one thing, if you watch the videos that I made before, is normally you don't want to include personal pronouns like I, we, you. To speak more formally, we would speak passively. So it can be seen. It can be seen that there are, not we can see, it can be seen that there are a lots gambling shops. And I know a lot is sometimes a trick for students to remember, but you can say lots of gambling shops, or you can say a lot of gambling shops. But a lots, you can't say. So a lot of, there are a lot of gambling shops that are usually busy of aged people. Busy of aged people. And I think everyone, when we read this, we know what the student's trying to say, busy of aged people. I think what they're trying to say is that these places are full of aged people, or that aged people frequent there, or aged people usually go there. Another small thing is gambling shops. And I think that everybody knows what gambling is. That's when you're betting money on a game and trying to win money. And everybody knows what a shop is. But using the words like gambling shops just shows maybe a small lack of vocabulary. A gambling shop is usually called a casino. So I'm not sure if that's what the student is looking to talk about here, but they might be better to use the word casino. As older people are retired, the pension money that they normally get are spent in betting shops. The pension money they normally get are spent. Okay, and so money is an uncountable noun. So this would be pension money that they normally get is spent in betting shops, in casinos. This example makes clear where retired people are more interested. I think the meaning is are most interested. This example makes clear, and I think here we'd want to say this example makes clear retired people are most interested in going to these places, or this example makes clear where retired people are most interested in spending their money, or something like that. I just think that the link needs to be a little bit clearer there, but we'll talk about that later. Thus, there is an obvious link between aged people and a unhappy society. So if you look at the word unhappy, there's a U, a vowel, so this would have to be an unhappy society. Here we're just correcting grammar and structure. So if you're finding that you're watching this video and not quite understanding what the essay is about, don't worry about that. After we finish correcting all the grammar, we'll come back and go through each paragraph again and just look at how the sentences link together. Okay, so this is just a grammar thing to begin with in structure. Okay, here is the third paragraph. As funded home care services has fallen, the over 50s, 60s probably will not get paid care in the next few years. This is very apparent that the government will not have the money to pay for the health care services. It is obvious that the society will be affected. Okay, I'll give you a second to read that and try to find a problem. Okay, let's look at the corrected version together. As funded home care services has fallen, so this is services, should be have fallen, the over 50s, 60s probably will not get paid care in the next few years. And I'd like to direct your attention to this slash. The student has included 50s/60s. Now sometimes in the courses that I teach, students will write essays and they'll use these kind of symbols, like an and symbol or a number sign. And this is not the best choice stylistically to include on your essay. Lots of students include this and sign, this sign in the middle here, and it definitely will not win you marks on an exam, definitely not on an IELTS exam. So you want to avoid these things. Now here the student has used 50s/60s, and I think their meaning is just people that are over 50 and over 60. And I suppose you could say, as funded home care services have fallen, the over 50s and 60s. But I think that, I guess both of those are just over 50, right? You don't have to say over 50 and over 60. You could just say over 50, because that's including everyone. So maybe what we could say is, as funded home care services have fallen, people aged 50 and over, or the over 50s, I guess, probably will not get paid care in the next few years. Probably will not get paid care. Get paid care, I'm not quite sure if we want to say that. You might want to say receive paid care. I think that the student is just saying that that older people in the home, they're not really receiving the care that they need because there's so many of them. So I think that maybe just a better way to phrase this would be will not receive paid care. This is very apparent that the government will not have the money to pay. This is very apparent. That's not correct either. We want to say it is very apparent that the government will not have the money to pay for the healthcare services. Now, the healthcare services, well, we don't know. Are we talking about baby healthcare services? No, we're talking about the old people. So we have to use these healthcare services, or pay for, yeah, the best choice would be these. So the government will not have to pay, not have the money to pay for these healthcare services. And then the student here is linking back to the idea they brought up in the sentence before it. It is obvious that the society will be affected. Okay, now structurally, the paragraph is also weak, and you may see why, but one thing is just that that it's short. There's only 3 sentences here, and I think that the and the topic sentence are kind of really closely linked together. So it might be an idea to just kind of separate them, maybe make one topic sentence and then make a separate, completely separate example sentence, and then not only that, that'll make the essay, this paragraph, a little bit longer. Okay, we'll move ahead. Okay, here's the conclusion paragraph. We'll read together. After analyzing the areas of older people, hobbies, and the lack of government funding to pay aged people care, it is clear that the only factor that will be affected and will have negative effects is the society. As we know, elderly people normally prefer to live alone. It is predicted that in the near future, the seniors group will suffer, especially their ill health also rise with age. Now there's a few mistakes here. Just take a second and look. And we'll move ahead. Okay. Okay, before we even get to the correction, I think the first main mistake that you may have noticed is that the first sentence is extremely long. I think you could actually break that up into 3 sentences. So, that's one main thing you want to avoid on your essay, is writing very, very long sentences, because as soon as you do that, then the structure of your essay is wrong, and if the structure of your essay is wrong, you're probably going to fail. So let's look at it from the beginning. After analyzing the areas of older people hobbies, it should be people's, apostrophe S, hobbies, and the lack of government funding to pay aged people care, should be pay for aged people care. It is clear that the only factor, that will be affected and will have negative effects is the society. Not the society, is society. Just take the. It is clear that the only factor that will be affected and will have negative effects, I think, will be affected, that will, I think the best way to say this is just to say will be affected, will be affected, it's kind of like saying the same thing twice, so just say will be affected negatively, is society. As we know, elderly people normally prefer to live alone. Okay, big mistake here. So here the student is introducing new information into the conclusion paragraph, which is not what you want to do. If you start saying new things in the conclusion paragraph, then the person marking your essay is in their head saying, why didn't this person bring up this during the essay in the 2 supporting paragraphs? So that whole thing's got to come out. As we know, elderly people normally prefer to live alone. No, that's not going to work. It is predicted that in the near future, the seniors group will suffer, and I think they had especially in their essay, but it should be especially their health will get worse with age. Especially their health will get worse with age. Okay, it is predicted that in the near future the seniors group will suffer, and especially and their health will especially get worse with age. Okay, now we're going to look at the essay one more time, and we're going to look at how the sentences and ideas link together. And you'll see that maybe you noticed yourself that some of the sentences in this essay are a little bit mistaken, and their meaning and the role that they're supposed to play in the essay is not correct. So so we'll get to that. We'll get to the next. So now my comments. Okay, overall the essay structure looks pretty good. The student has separated all of the main ideas into paragraphs. So as we saw, the student did have 4 paragraphs, which is very important, very big thing. And I can clearly see that many of your sentences are in order. So as we read that, you might have noticed the student did a very good job of making sure they had background statement, thesis, outline sentence, topic sentence examples, discussions, conclusions, and then just in the conclusion paragraph, a little bit weak there, but we'll go over that as well. Now the essay is also almost exactly 250 words, which is a very good thing. If you know if you're writing your IELTS exam, you have to have a minimum of 250 words, and the way that I see that is that you want to have as close to 250 as possible. And there's a few reasons for that. One is that if you're writing a very long essay, it will take up a lot of time. And as you know, you don't have much time on the IELTS exam to write the essay. So you want to make it as short as possible without actually going below the 250 word limit. I think this person's essay was maybe 253 or 254 words. So the number of words was pretty good. Okay, now let's go over some of the problems. So the first big problem was the thesis. So here you can see in black, this is the student's thesis. It is believed that aged people have a negative effect on society. Now, if you remember in the very first video that I did about this series, just before this, I talked about the essay question saying that it's not asking if old people themselves have a negative effect on society. It's asking about the trend of old person numbers in society growing. Does this have a negative effect or not? So, so the student unfortunately made the mistake of saying that, it's just talking about old people. That's not entirely true. So what I write here is this thesis does not answer the essay question. The essay question is asking you to comment on the rise of aged people, not on aged people themselves. So the thesis should be, it is believed, sorry, I'll just put it back up so you can see both the beginning and the second. It is believed the increase of aged people in many countries has a negative effect on society. So here you can see in this thesis, we're pinpointing the idea of trend, that this is a growing thing, and that in this student's opinion, that the growth of old people in society is negative. Okay, I'll take a moment just to talk about one thing. So sometimes when you're writing an essay and you don't have a lot of time, it's sometimes best to try and think about, well, what essay would be the easiest essay to write? What point of view would be the easiest point of view to prove? And I think, in my opinion, perhaps you disagree with me, but I think the opposite would be an easier essay to write. Because here we have to argue that, old people and their growing numbers has a negative effect on society. And I just think that it would be easier to write that the growth of old people maybe it does provide society with some positive things. Maybe, I suppose either, you could write it on either is fine, but in my opinion, I think that it would just be easier to write about the positive effects that old people have on society. Anyways, it doesn't matter, because the student decided to write it on the negative, and that's totally fine. Okay, now we come to the outline sentence. And my comment to them was, aside from this, I feel your two supporting arguments are weak. In your outline sentence, in the introduction, you write, now here's the student's outline sentence in black. This will be proven by analyzing one of the way that retired people spend their money. as they are more likely to be providing unpaid care. Okay, now just reading it again, I'm not sure if you look at this outline sentence, if you can clearly see the two areas that they're going to talk about in the supporting paragraphs. Because when I look at it, I just don't find that it's that clear. I'm just not quite sure what they're talking about. So my comment to them was, I think I understand your 2 points, but they're not very clear. I think you mean, number one, that old people have a negative effect on society because they spend money in a wasteful manner. So the idea being that old people use their money in ways that are not very useful. And then the second idea that I think the student is trying to say is that old people have a negative effect on society because they cost a country's government a lot of money. Back to the outline sentence, they're more likely to be providing unpaid care. Now, when it's worded this way, it sounds like the old people are giving someone unpaid care. I don't think the old people are giving people care, whether paid or unpaid, but the old people are ones receiving care. So I think the meaning is also a little bit messed up. Anyways, I think that's what's on in number 2. Unfortunately, your IELTS examiner will not understand these arguments if you write them in this way. You should write them very clearly, like this. So I've rewritten the outline sentence. Now I just used the 2 ideas that I think the student is trying to say. This will be proven by analyzing the wasteful manner in which elderly people spend money, as well as the striking care of the elderly puts on a country's government economically. So if you look at this now, it's much clearer. So the first idea is that we're going to look at how old people spend money in a wasteful manner, and then connect that to how this overall makes the growth of old people in society a negative trend. And then the second idea is the strain that the government has to undertake to look after old people. And again, we're going to connect that idea to how the growth in numbers of old people in society is negative. Okay, I hope you follow me on that. Okay, now let's read the blue. These are my comments. These 2 supporting topics are probably not the best arguments you can make to prove this thesis. Personally, I would have written about one of these topics. And I just think that the first point in their outline sentence, that old people spend money in a wasteful manner, is not really that strong. I'm not really. Anyways, I think there's just a better point we can use. So, for example, perhaps something like elderly people need to be looked after, and this takes up a lot of time. Or elderly people's opinions are probably not as new as younger people's opinions. So maybe we could argue that their ideas are a bit dated because they're older, and maybe they don't understand the world today as a lot of people do. And somehow we could show that maybe holds society back in some way, or it doesn't help society anyways. Increased numbers of elderly people in society may cause strain within families, as more money is needed to take care of them. So here, maybe we could have talked about the way that families have to make sure that they have enough money to take care of these older members of their family, and that this is causing them a lot of strain, and perhaps it's hurting the family unit or something. We could have developed that. So that's just my thinking there. Is I think that the student chose some topics to talk about in the supporting paragraphs that could have been better. Okay. I'm going to put this on one page. Let's make it easier to see. So your supporting paragraphs also need some work. Here's your first supporting paragraph. So I'll read it really quickly. On these days, we can see there are lots of gambling shops that are usually busy of aged people. As older people are retired, the pension money that they normally get are spent in betting shops. This example makes clear where retired people are more interested. Thus, there is an obvious link between aged people and an unhappy society. So this is the first point that that the student is talking about, where old people spend money in a wasteful manner. And my comments were just that that I'm not really sure what a gambling shop was, and I asked them, is it like a casino? I'm unsure if this is an effective example, because I do not think old people usually go to casinos to gamble, not more than regular people anyways. So I'm not sure. Maybe in this student's country it's true. Maybe old people do go to casinos a lot. But the time I spent in Dubai, and I know in Canada, and I've also been in China now for a little while, and I've never really known old people to be really big into wasting their money in casinos or gambling. You know, not in my experience anyways. So I think the example is a little bit weak, because it's hard to see that that's actually a true thing. So I think the example is perhaps a little bit strange. Also, your discussion sentence does not make sense. This example makes clear where retired people are more interested, which is a little bit difficult to understand. What does this sentence mean? Sorry, I'll pull this onto one page again. So what does this sentence mean? Are you trying to show that retired people are interested in wasting money in immoral places? If this is the case, perhaps your sentence could read. So I think that the student might have been talking about old people using money in immoral places, which just means is like bad places. So like casinos, I guess, or places that are not really positive, considered positive in most societies. So I thought that they could change the sentence to, this example makes it clear that retired people consistently waste money in immoral places. Okay, unfortunately this whole paragraph I just feel is just weak, because the idea is weak, that old people are spending money in wastefully. Now we go on to the conclusion sentence, and the concluding sentence is also bizarre. Do aged people really make a society unhappy? Perhaps what you mean is that growing numbers of old people will be doing growing numbers of bad things. So I think the student originally said that it is clear that old people make a society unhappy, which again, I don't think that sentence is true. I think most people would argue that old people make society happier, if anything. But maybe the idea that they were trying to talk about is that because old people are spending money in immoral places like casinos and other things, that if there's more and more old people, then there are more and more people spending money in bad places. Because if one old person is spending it in a bad place, then 100,000 old people will also be spending 100,000 times. 100,000 different people will be spending the money in bad places. So I thought that the student could write this sentence as, thus there is an obvious link between a growing aged population and immoral conduct within society. Now, again, personally, this is a sentence that I would not agree with, because I think that old people typically are conducting more moral conduct than most other people, I would imagine. I would not imagine old people to generally be doing. Okay, so overall, my thoughts on the first paragraph. I really think the entire idea in the first paragraph is untrue and perhaps a little bit strange. I think it would be better for you to rewrite the first paragraph completely and choose a different topic explaining why more old people in society is negative. For example, in the small list of possible topics that I made for you above, I think you could talk about how old people's ideas are somewhat dated, too traditional, and hold society back in certain ways. Okay, so again, I know I'm saying the same thing over and over, but the first paragraph talking about the immoral conduct of old people and how old people are spending money in wasteful ways is not strong. So I think that the student needs to take that completely out and then put in a new idea. Okay, so let's go on to the second supporting paragraph. Now the second supporting paragraph only has 3 sentences. So if you remember, I pointed out when we did the grammar for the second supporting paragraph that it was the topic and the example that I think were kind of linked together. So here I wrote, it is my opinion that you would be best to write a topic sentence for this paragraph before you introduce your example of the fall of funded home care service for the elderly. I think you also need to make it clear that the main problem is that taking care of elderly people puts enormous strain on a country's government. So I think that in this paragraph, the idea is okay. I think that they're trying to show that society is strained because they have to take care of old people. I just don't think that it was quite presented in the strongest way that it could be. So I think, anyways, just to wrap that up, I think then they need to have a topic sentence. Sorry, it's kind of hard to explain if you're not actually looking at it. One second, let me go back up here and... nope. Here we go. So as funded home care services has fallen, the over 50s, 60s will probably not get paid care in the next few years. So the idea was take this first sentence and break it into 2 sentences. Make it a topic sentence and then an example. So the example being that in the future, the over 50s and 60s will probably not be receiving paid care. And then we link that. We would say that this is because they are putting so much strain on the government, and taking care of old people costs so much money. Okay, so that was what we were going to do there. Now, come back down here again. Now, the conclusion sentence in this paragraph reads, "It is obvious that society will be affected." And in many classes, students, they write sentences like this, where the conclusion sentence is, I cannot see the link, to the thesis, because if you remember, firstly, the thesis was talking about affecting society negatively, and then here the student writes in the sentence, "It is obvious that the society will be affected." Well, we don't really know what they're talking about. Are they talking about it being affected positively or negatively, or in a big way, in a small way? Doesn't really say. So I think the link to your thesis here has to be a bit stronger. For example, as a result of this, it is clear that a growing elderly population becomes a burden to society and ultimately affects it in a negative way. So if the word burden is new, a burden is something that makes things more difficult. So a burden to society would be something that makes society, or gives society maybe a small problem, or makes things more difficult for society. Okay, so in the green you can see that there's a much more clearer link to the thesis. Now let's move on to the conclusion paragraph. Your conclusion paragraph is also structurally incorrect. Here is the very first sentence. After analyzing the areas of older people's hobbies and the lack of government funding to pay for aged people care, it is clear that the only factor that will be affected and will have negative effects is the society. As we know, elderly people normally prefer to live alone. So as we talked about before, of course, the first main problem is that this sentence is way too long. Writing this on an IELTS exam would be a disaster. And that's true. Run-on sentences on an IELTS exam are definitely not going to help you. They will probably cause you to fail. Also, I do not understand why you talk about elderly people wanting to live alone. Why are you introducing a new idea in the conclusion paragraph? In addition, the restatement of thesis is very difficult to detect. So if you remember, in your conclusion paragraph, you want to restate your thesis again using different words. Okay. Now finally, your prediction statement is not on topic. So here in black we see the student's original prediction statement. It is predicted that in near future the seniors group will suffer, especially their ill health will also rise with age. So aside from the grammar, the prediction itself is supposed to be an educated guess on your part how the growing population of aging people will affect society in the future. So here the student talks about the ill health of the old people rising with age, which I think is obvious, and in the future seniors group will suffer. But I think that we want to have the prediction a little bit more on topic. Now if you look to the green, I've rewritten this sentence. Although unfortunate, the negatives... this should be negative. The negative impacts of an aging society are only predicted to grow in the future. So in the thesis, we were talking about the negative or the positive. Remember, we were to decide whether it was negative or positive. Now, in the prediction, we're just saying whether we think this is going to continue. Are the negative things going to become more and more, or are they going to recede? So I think that a sentence like this, although unfortunate, the negative impacts of an aging society are only predicted to grow in the future. This takes the entire essay about what we've been arguing, so that the growth of old people in numbers in society is going to continue into the future, and we argued that this was negative, so we're also going to say that this is going to negatively impact society more and more. Okay, now finally, sometimes students ask, because it can seem like you're repeating yourself many times in an essay. So in this essay in particular, we used some words like negative and society and elderly, and students sometimes they'll come to me and they'll say, you know, I feel maybe that this is going to be a bad thing if I keep repeating myself. I think I should be writing new things all the time. But that's not entirely true. All the time, you want to have some keywords that appear throughout the essay. So it shows that there's kind of a link between each of the paragraphs and that the ideas are the same. The things that need to be new are the ideas in the two supporting paragraphs and the ideas presented in the introduction paragraph. The conclusion paragraph itself should not contain any new information at all, aside from your prediction. Your prediction is perhaps a new idea because it's sort of your feeling or your opinion on what's going to happen in the future. But the conclusions paragraph itself should not be presenting any new information, to help argue, because that should already have been done in the two supporting paragraphs, right? That's what the supporting paragraphs do, is they argue in favor of your thesis, and they try to help you you write your thesis. You try to help you prove your thesis. So here I wrote, I know that it may seem like you're repeating yourself a lot and using the words negative society and elderly many times in this essay, but that is okay. These are keywords for the essay and help to show your essay is linked to your essay question. Okay, so that concludes